The 154-page report on last year's riots found that the state failed in distributing and anticipating the troubles of the July unrest, or just anticipating the troubles of the July unrest. So according to the panelists, poor service delivery, unacceptable living conditions, the state of the economy and the persistent levels of poverty provided a ripe environment for the unrest to take place. We discuss this further, but we're joined by Nkululeko Majozi, social security researcher at the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Majozi, this afternoon. Perhaps let's just start with the work that you do. The Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute.
Good afternoon, Tutu, and thanks for having me. Yes, so the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, as the name explains itself, we deal with research that focuses on the impact of poverty and inequality and the causes of poverty and inequality in our society. And we focus our efforts at building research that can help the country to put in place policies to combat poverty and inequality.
Let's talk about the causes of poverty and inequality in South Africa. What does your research suggest?
Well, I mean, poverty and inequality in South Africa is a result of our country's history, embedded in colonialism and apartheid. I know people, after almost 30 years of democracy, tend to get tired of hearing about colonialism or the impacts of colonialism and apartheid. But the fact remains that the legacy of those systems, of those racist systems, still remains with us. And one of, or some of the measures that were put in place during colonialism and apartheid around the economy and the labor markets is that jobs previously were reserved, or professional jobs rather, were previously reserved for whites, whilst black people in general, which includes Indian, colored and black people, were constrained or were seen only as a source of cheap labor. And that also extended to education opportunities. There was an outlook during the time that black people did not need to get educated because their days would only be spent in the field, in the farms, in the mines, as cheap labor. And so the situation that we have right now in South Africa is that now we have a generation of people who are not sufficiently educated to take part in this economy. On top of that, globalization and the movement of the world towards an information economy, and nowadays we speak of the fourth industrial revolution. You find that South Africans, the majority of them, are not sufficiently skilled for the jobs that are needed today. So the causes, in a nutshell, of poverty and inequality in South Africa are around unemployment. Unemployment is a great cause. The South African economy has not been able to produce jobs in a sustainable way post-94, and that's because the economy, the mechanics and the structure of the economy has still not changed from apartheid. We still have a few people owning the means of production, and the economy still needs to be opened up, but also the lack of skills as well, as I have mentioned.
Then enters the unrest in July. So the panel of experts that put together this report mentioning that there does not seem to exist a clear plan with budgets and a timetable to effectively address the matter of poverty, underdevelopment and inequality. So you say that the work you do helps in formulating policies. Is South Africa in short of policies or action as suggested by this report?
Well, the thing is that South Africa, how our government views, so the view within our government is that the best way for us to eradicate poverty and inequality is for people to have jobs. but then on the other side, we have an economy that structurally has been unable for almost 3 decades now to produce those jobs that are needed for the vast amounts of people that are coming into the job sector every year. So in the absence of that, we also need a comprehensive social protection system that can provide those measures that are needed for people to be able to survive and also to make opportunities for themselves within the environment that they find themselves in. But then again, you find that our social protection system is neither comprehensive and it's also fragmented. And what I mean by that is that the majority of South Africans who are of working age, between the ages of 18 and 59, do not have any sort of social security measure to assist them to survive on a daily basis, whilst at the same time they are the most affected by the issues of unemployment leading to poverty and inequality.
There are tensions that are simmering or bubbling under in South Africa, if you will, where we're seeing videos on social media circulating, speaking to a number of people who will tell you that South Africa's problems or woes, especially for young people, are related to the entrance of people who are not necessarily from South Africa into the job space, whichever level it may be. From the work that you do, with the context that you have given us, do you perceive that, every time we see bouts of whether it's violence or people kicking other people from outside of South Africa, there's something to be said about poverty and the underlying factors and people then viewing other people as coming into their space to take from them?
Well, okay, I think on that issue, we need to make things very clear. We find in the situation that we find ourselves in, whereby we do not have, our economy is unable to produce enough jobs for South Africans. And yes, there is an element of truth to the fact that you find that other African refugees coming into our country for escaping different challenges from their countries are coming into the space to compete for those low-level jobs that South Africans are already competing for amongst each other. So there is a level of truth to that, to say that African migrants have come into the space, especially when you look at sectors such as the restaurant sector, where you find that a significant amount of people that are employed there are African nationals. And so, but we cannot place the blame on African nationals, because the blame needs to be shared amongst the government and also the employers who take advantage of the fact that the country has these kinds of challenges, and they try and run away from paying the wages that they should be paying to South Africans, that they view South Africans as being much more expensive labor. Whereas foreign nationals who also find themselves in a position of vulnerability are there for the employers to exploit. But it's never something desirable to see Africans victimizing each other as a result of failures of the government to transform the economy.
Indeed. In just maybe trying to find solutions, you are from the Poverty and Inequality Institute, which talks to, the fact that we haven't made strides where this is concerned. What then, does the research suggest, or the people that you speak to on the ground when you're formulating the research, what do they want to see?
So, in the absence now in the immediate term to medium long term, in the absence of an economy that can create the number of jobs that South Africans need to be able to be self-sufficient, the best measure that we can put in place as a country is a comprehensive social security system, whereby we provide measures to help support poor and vulnerable South Africans, including documented refugees and asylum seekers, with forms of income support that can help them to survive on a daily basis. We've seen also from the World's Social Protection Report of the ILO, which was released in December, I think, where they say that countries that spend a lot on social expenditure and also social security are able to reduce, on average, inequality by a quarter. And this is more true with countries, OECD countries. So, and we've seen during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, that the countries that have invested more and put more social security measures to cushion the blow of the pandemic in terms of job losses and so on, have been able, in fact, to provide their people with sufficient measures to actually help them survive. You know, so in terms of our research, the focus now is on getting South Africa to implement a more comprehensive social security measure that can be, and we view that as an immediate solution that can work. But much more immediate than that would be the extension of the COVID-19 Social Relief of Distress Grant, which is famously known as the 350 grant, which has also played a great part in terms of cushioning South Africans against the scourge of unemployment, poverty and inequality during these past 2 years of the pandemic. So if the government can extend that grant, but also increase the value of the grant and look to maybe implement the grant as a permanent grant, which would be a form of basic income grant or basic income guarantee or basic income support, whichever phrase one prefers.
Nkululeko Majozi, social security researcher at the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon.